Welcome to ypww Lesson 6. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's lesson text is coming out of Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 12 through 15. The topic is gratitude and the moral life. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 12 through 15. The King James Version. When thou hast made an end of tithing all the tithes of thine increase the third year, which is the year of tithing, and hast given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within thy gates and be filled, then thou shalt say before the Lord thy God, I have brought away the hollow things out of mine house, and also have given them unto the Levite, and unto the stranger, to the fatherless and to the widow, according to all thy commandments, which thou hast commanded me. I have not transgressed thy commandments, neither have I forgotten them. I have not eaten thereof in my mourning, neither have I taken away aught thereof for any unclean use, nor given aught thereof for the dead. But I have hearkened to the voice of the Lord my God, and have done according to all that thou hast commanded me. Look down from thy holy habitation, from heaven, and bless thy people Israel, and the land which thou hast given us, as thou swearest unto our fathers, a land that floweth with milk and honey. The lesson aim says, to establish that acknowledging God as the source of our blessings is an important feature of the Christian moral life. The memory verse says, look down from thy holy habitation, from heaven, and bless thy people Israel, and the land which thou hast given us, as thou swearest unto our fathers, a land that floweth with milk and honey. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 15. That was the King James Version. The NIV version of the same verse. Look down from heaven, your holy dwelling place, and bless your people Israel, and the land you have given us as you promised on oath to our ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey. The introduction says, I remember reading a story about a boat that got wrecked on Lake Michigan. The report mentioned that a group of students from one of the nearby universities organized themselves into rescue teams. One student saved 17 people from the wrecked ship. About 20 years later, a famous evangelist was talking about this incident at a meeting in California. A man called out in the audience, the gentleman who saved those 17 people is present. The evangelist invited the gentleman to the platform and asked him what he remembered most about the event on Lake Michigan. The gentleman who saved 17 people replied, of all the people I risked my life to save, not one of them has ever thanked me. Unfortunately, many of us treat God like those rescued people treated the gentleman who saved them from drowning in Lake Michigan. We simply do not thank the Lord for his deeds. We continue to live our lives as though God owed us the favors we receive from him. The passage with which we are now concerned seeks to correct this type of attitude. It provides a pattern for thanking God. After a brief examination of the structure and content of the passage, we will raise questions about what this text is saying to us. The question to be answered is, how does this passage position us to overcome ingratitude toward the Lord? The discussion says, Deuteronomy 26, verses 12 through 15, governs behavior regarding the triennial collection and distribution of the annual tithe exclusively. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 12 through 15 has two major parts. 1. Guidelines regarding the presentation and distribution of the tithes triennially. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 12. A. The year for the sharing of tithes with weak social subgroups in the biblical communities, and that's verse 12. B, the site for the consumption of tithes, and that is also verse 12. Number 2, the ritual that accompanied the presentation of the triennial tithes, Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 13 to 15. A, the recitation, and that's Deuteronomy 26, verses 13 and 14. B, the prayer, and that's Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 15. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 12 authorizes the biblical community to share the annual tithe with the Levite, widow, stranger, and orphan triennially. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 12 is clear about this issue, namely the period for providing public assistance to the Levite and a category of socially weak, vulnerable individuals. This verse also includes the phrase that they may eat the tithe within thy gates and be filled. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 12 indicates that the local villages were the venues for the distribution and consumption of the triennial tithes. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 13 introduces the ritual associated with the presentation of the tithes. No recitation after the deposition of the tithes in the third year is present in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 22 to 29. It is noticeable that a series of affirmations and a prayer were elements in this liturgy. The offerer professes that he removed the tithes, the holy thing, from his house, and that he gave them to the widow, stranger, and orphan. Furthermore, Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 13 states that the offerer should perform the ritual in the presence of God. Local settlements were sites for the deposit of the tithe triennially, but the official worship site was the venue for the execution of the ritual that attended depositing the tithe in the local villages. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 14 identifies two additional declarations that were part of the liturgy associated with the distribution of the tithes to the widow, stranger, and orphan. The offerer, local peasant farmer, or herder affirmed his purity by stating that he did not eat while afflicted and unclean, and that he gave no part of the tithes to the dead. The offerer also affirmed his loyalty to the Lord by distributing his goods to the widows, strangers, and orphans in the local villages. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 15 identifies the final element in the recitation of the ritual that accompanied the deposit of tithes in the local villages. This element is a request for divine favor for the people and on the agricultural yields in the biblical communities. More importantly, Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 15 identifies the foundation of this petition by linking this request for prosperity, health, and the happiness of the people to a promise that God made to the ancestors. The application says, the present text suggests the following points about showing thankfulness to God. 1. Expressions of thankfulness to the Lord should be public. 2. Expressions of thankfulness to the Lord should be passionate. And 3. Expressions of thankfulness to the Lord should be particular. Let us look more closely at each issue. Number 1. Expressions of thankfulness to the Lord should be public. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 13 tells the offerer that he should perform the ritual in the presence of God. The phrase that appears in Deuteronomy 26, verse 13 is before the Lord thy God. As it was said above, this phrase indicates that the ceremony was to be performed at a shrine, namely a place that was exposed to general view. Shrines in ancient Israel were open to the masses. Consequently, everyone present could observe the activities. The person who presented the tithes was to thank God for his goodness, but he was also supposed to do it in a place where others could see it. Thanking God for his goodness should be done publicly as well as privately. Number 2, expressions of thankfulness to the Lord should be passionate. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 13 and 14 indicates that the offerer was showing his seriousness about what he was doing by uttering an oath. The one who presented the tithes was sincere about what was happening. He wanted God to know that he meant business. He wanted the Lord to know that his heart was in what he was doing. He was putting his energy into it. The offerer was fervent in spirit, for thanking God for his goodness should be done in fervor. Number 3, expressions of thankfulness to the Lord should be particular. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 13 and 14 indicates that the person who is showing his gratitude to God for what he has done for him is thanking God for a specific thing. To the best of our ability, we should thank God for everything he does for us. No doubt, it is difficult to identify all our blessings. However, we should be mindful of as many of them as possible. God is good to us, and we should list the blessings. When the chance presents itself, we should thank God for each thing he has done. Remember, it is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed. He does not have to do anything for us. He, however, chooses to be good to us. Thanking God for his goodness should be done in specificity. Our lesson illustration. Quentin, a faithful member of the Sunshine Band, sat at dinner in a restaurant. The waiter brought the food to the table. The food came in covered dishes. The waiter slowly lifted the lids, and Quentin saw the meal. Bread and water were all Quentin saw, so he thought that this was all there was to eat. As Quentin said the grace, he exclaimed, "Bread, water, and Jesus too. God, thank you for your kindness." Life is so much better when we learn to appreciate God and thank him for whatever life brings. Now the questions for today's lesson. Question 1. What can happen in the lives of saints if they no longer give praise and thanks to God? Question 2. How can saints be passionate about the giving of thanks to God in times of trouble? Question 3. During prayer, should we simply have times when we give thanks to God and not ask him for anything? Why or why not? Question 4. The biblical passage, which was the basis of this lesson, indicates that rituals should accompany giving. In your thinking, is there any significance to these ceremonies? Are they useful today? Why or why not? Make sure to write down your answers and study the scriptures. God bless you, and thank you for joining me today.